Good morning. Today we're going to be making bread. So the first thing that I like to do when I'm making bread is get all of my materials ready. I'm going to need flour, yeast. I am using this Fleischmann's Active Dry Yeast. And then the recipe calls for kosher salt. I don't actually have any of that, but this will do the trick. And then I have my measuring cup, and I like to use a wooden spoon. Okay, so the first thing it said to do was to add the yeast, the warm water, and the salt into the bowl and to stir them up. So the recipe itself is for 4 loaves of bread. So I cut this down into thirds. So we would have half of a teaspoon. Excuse me, this should say half of a tablespoon. So I'm adding half of a tablespoon of the yeast to the bowl here. And then half of a tablespoon of salt, but I recommend that you do your warm water first. Now, the water, if you don't have a thermometer, you can just basically touch the container. It should feel warm. If you put your finger in there, it should feel similar to your body temperature. You don't want it to be hot because, of course, we know that'll kill the yeast. But we also know that yeast are pretty flexible. I mean, they're definitely Goldilocks, but they have a range, right? Between about 70 Fahrenheit and, probably about 120, or they start to die around 130. So if it's hot, you don't want to use it. And if it's cold, really, really cold, that's not going to work very well either. So basically, I'm just gently stirring the water and the yeast, and I'm going to let it sit there for a second. And now I'm going to add my salt. And the purpose of the salt is just flavor. So I'm going to use half of a tablespoon of salt. So I'm using equal parts salt to yeast. And again, the yeast don't use this. This is just for flavor. I can actually see already in my bowl that my yeast are already waking up. Don't know how well you can see those bubbles in there, but certainly bubbles come from stirring, but these are very clearly bubbles of carbon dioxide. So that's pretty cool. Now I'm going to add in my salt and stir that up. Okay. And the next thing that I need to do is add 2 cups of flour plus 2 tablespoons. And I'm actually not super careful with my measuring on flour. It looks like I'm going to need more flour, as a matter of fact. But the key, something my mom taught me when I was learning how to bake, is that to get what's called a leveled measuring cup, you sort of fill the cup to a little bit of overflowing. Let me move this so you can see it better. So I fill it a little overflowing, and then I use a knife. And don't pack it down, but kind of spreading it out. And then I just go flat along the top to get the excess flour. And then I have a nice leveled cup. So this is 1 cup. And this is not the best way to measure out flour, as you're going to see. I'm going to get it all over my table, but oh well. All in the name of science, right? Okay, and again, I'm not pressing it down. I'm just kind of spreading it out and then leveling it off. So here's my 2nd cup. I'm just pouring it in. And then in theory, I should have 2 tablespoons. I'm going to be kind of not as careful maybe as I should be, but if this is a half tablespoon and I need 2 total, then I need to add 4 halves. So 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Another thing my mom always taught me is to put my materials away as I go. I'm going to take this back to my cupboard. All right. And then the next thing that we need to do is just stir this up. So this is where things can get a little tricky. This is going to get really sticky. If you've ever done flour and water, I think it's flour and water that you use to make like that glue for paper mache. Did you guys ever do that in elementary school? I feel like I did. At any rate, this will get really sticky, and that's okay. I'm just kind of trying to stir this around. Basically, I want to stir it until the mixture looks consistently moistened. Okay, so I want to just get all of the wet parts out. And this is not hard to stir, but it's definitely thick and kind of heavy. And I'm just going to kind of stir it a little bit extra. And this should be good. So right now, it's looking really runny. This is not what my bread normally looks like when I make bread. So we'll see how this goes. Actually, now that I think about it, I might have added a little bit of extra water. So looking at this, now I've never made this recipe. Just gonna add the rest of that in. I've never made this recipe, but I have made bread a lot, and it's not usually runny. This is looking much more like it should look. This recipe is different though because it's what's called no knead. And it's not knead as in like, oh, I need you, but knead as in K-N-E-A-D, which is what bakers do usually when making bread. So this looks a lot better. It's still perhaps a little bit runny. Again, I added a little bit more water than I should have because I wasn't being very careful. But you could see that it kind of, you know, it shouldn't really fall from the spoon as much as mine is. But we'll give it a go. We'll see what happens. The worst thing that would happen is just that when it's time to come back to this in about 5 hours, I might just need to add some more dough. Excuse me, some more flour. And that's okay. In fact, often I add flour to my hands when dealing with this super sticky dough because I'm going to use my finger to scoop this into the bowl, and you will see that it gets pretty sticky. So it's just sticky. This would not be something that I would want to knead because it would just get all over my hands and make a big mess. But there you go. So another thing that bakers will often do is remove the dough from the bowl it was mixed in and put it into a clean bowl that's large, because this is going to at least double in size. They will move it to a clean bowl and then line it with oil, olive oil or coconut oil or whatever you use at your house. But I'm going to just do it as the recipe said, and it didn't say that I needed to do it. So here you go. I'm going to cover this loosely. It says that it does not need to be airtight. So I'm just going to use a piece of plastic wrap to cover the bowl loosely, not tightly. And then I'm going to cover it. I'm going to add a tea towel to cover it. And here's a tea towel that has my sister-in-law, Lily Lamott, her book that she just published. It's a graphic novel called Measuring Up. And it's really good. You should totally check it out. I'm really proud of her. All right, so I'm just going to leave this sitting right here. The sun is coming in. It's pretty warm. And I'm just going to leave this sitting here for about 5 hours. So I will see you in about 5 hours.